Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And we are into the first Tuesday show of 2024. So happy New Year to those of you who are Tuesday listeners, to me and Joel as we explore every single rabbit hole that can possibly be explored in the LOA universe. And we're going to go down another one today. This is one of our favorite ones. It's going to be about how to stop negative thinking. And ironically, we're going to do that by stopping negative thinking. I mean, that sounds very repetitive and redundant, but in fact, that's literally what we're going to do. We're going to do it by thinking in order to stop negative thinking. I think I'm confusing the issue, Joel. I'm going to let you explain it. This came out of a video you found. Why don't you tell us about it?
I have no idea what we're talking about. So, by the way, I'm comically unprepared.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll help you with it then, because you shared a video on Facebook, and the video was by a gentleman who was presenting a method for stopping negative thinking.
Okay.
And the method he proposed was to use an acronym, THINK, T-H-I-N-K. And THINK has 5 different pieces to it. The T stands for true, the H stands for helpful, the I stands for inspiring, the N for necessary, and the K for kind. And what he's suggesting is if you can focus at those particular times where you're really caught in a negative thinking trap, if you can focus on trying to identify what is the state of each one of those different pieces of think, then you can shift your negative thinking into a more positive vein.
Yes. It was a good video, and it's something I've never really heard put that way. I like how you started the description, because stopping negative thinking by thinking it seems counterintuitive. I mean, you're in the process of negative thinking, so you're going to use the same process. It's like my old favorite statement. The brain is the most important organ in the body, according to the brain. So
I like that.
yeah. So it's like, of course it feels that way. But, the negative thinking really takes on its own version of spiraling often. It just goes into, it catches onto itself, that it just keeps going and going and going. So anything that breaks negative thinking. So I liked the video because it's one of the few videos that actually gives you something to do to actually stop negative thinking, instead of just saying, don't do it.
Right.
It's like, so, the part that got me the most was the negative thinking is the first question is what I'm thinking true? Is this process, or is it just me anticipating negative? Is it just me using old stuff happening? Is it really true? Okay. An example for me is, my son's car is really an obnoxious expense in my life. Is it always something? It's just always something. So he told me that he cracked his windshield the other day, and I was like, okay, this is no big deal. But, the idea was, I called the insurance company, and they said, cause I had heard somewhere there's no deductible on windshields, but they informed me that we have a $500 deductible. Ironically, the windshield cost about $700. So, so I said, well, I'm not going to give you $200. I'm just going to pay for it. So I started this, like everything, this is ridiculous, and this car is costing too much money. And I started the process of just going down a rabbit hole of negativity about the car, not life in general, but about the car.
Right.
And so I had a friend that I said, I want to spend $700 on the windshield. He goes, you need to call these people. They're a local company, not So I'm like, oh, okay. So turns out I can get it done for $300, which is far better. And I didn't care about the 7 either, but the idea of just the concept that what are we doing? So my initial reaction was, this is ridiculous, all this. The statement I was thinking it was not accurate, because the truth is the car hasn't been that expensive. If you're going to insure a kid to drive, it's expensive. I didn't buy him a new car. I bought him a used car because I didn't want to spend all the money on a new car, but I probably have about spent the new car money. Uh, but the truth is, none of this matters. It's not a big deal. But that negative thought process in the big scheme of my life. So when I would ask the question, is all of this negative thinking about the car true? No, it's not, because I have an abundance. I could care less. If we needed to go buy a new car tomorrow, we're good. It doesn't matter. I don't care. So I'm not going to get into negative spirals over something that's not true. The statement of my negative thinking came from a position of lack, which I don't have. But I was thinking with a lack mindset, like, and nobody likes to spend money they don't have to spend, but this is not a big deal on my horizon. So I like that idea of anything you're thinking, is it true? And of course, what I always do is, so I listen to his, like you said, the think, all the stuff he said, but I like to do sort of my own idea of, like, I do like the true statement, but I like to go further. Could this really affect me? If this negative thinking, am I creating based on, I have a litmus. I asked a checklist on negative thinking, and 99% of negative thinking is just based on old historical stuff that's not even remotely true anymore. But the brain feeds back on negative stuff to bring it current.
Right. Okay.
And that's what, but the concept that having a checklist for negative thinking is what I loved about the video. If I'm trying to make sense here, the checklist, whether I liked all of his things, I did like the truth concept. But I also like the idea of just, why don't we create our own checklist for negative thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also it struck me that the idea of using an acronym like this is a way of kind of reminding ourselves how it is the negative thinking becomes so strongly negative in the first place. It's through the repetition. It's a repeated form of thinking. And the more we repeat it to ourselves or in our conversations or whatever, we are essentially making it more and more powerful every single time.
Yes.
And in the process of making it more and more powerful, we're basically setting everything up into, I guess I'd call it an exaggerating echo chamber. It's an internal echo chamber that really only we hear. And every time that we echo our negative thought in there, it gets worse. It's worse than it was 5 minutes ago. It's worse than it was 10 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So for me, the true question that's being asked here, is it true, is really about, is it true, or is it simply I've taken it to the next level of exaggeration?
Yes. Good point. Yes, I like that. I like how you said that.
Because if the truth of it has now become how exaggerated is it, then it becomes very clear what the answer is. No, it's not true. It's just exaggerated. Right.
So this is a process of thinking that, we all know with the spiraling of negative, or I would assume we all know the spiral of negative thinking and how it feeds on itself. So any of these, creating your own acronym or using this acronym and the truth concept and the filtering of truth is a way to break that, because everything happens in, there's energy in negative thinking. There's momentum in negative thinking. There's momentum in positive thinking.
Yeah.
And so just being able to have any type of tool to break that and not entertain it, not allow it to go any further. And that's what struck me about the video, is it gave you something to do. Mm-hmm. You could have said, jump up and down and, scream something 5 times. That still would have been something to do. But it makes sense what he was saying. And, he seemed like a pretty sharp guy. I liked some of the stuff he was saying during the video. So I do agree with it overall.
Mm-hmm. Now, the second word too, I think ties into what we were just talking about, this exaggeration component, because the second word, the second letter of the acronym H is for helpful. And so now it becomes, is this exaggerated negative pattern helpful? When you put the word exaggerate in there, well, first of all, it's not helpful just to be, just to look out for the negative. But when you put the exaggerated part, there's nothing helpful about the exaggeration, unless your goal is just to make it worse.
Yes.
In which case, it's very, very helpful for that.
Yeah. But, and that's why I like that, is it being exaggeratedly that is negative when you exaggerate it. And is it helpful? as you said, negative isn't helpful, but exaggerated negative is harmful. I mean, it's not even neutral. It's just terrible because you're creating you're creating an extreme traumatic response to a very unlikely need for that response. I mean, so there may be something wrong, but when you escalate everything to DEFCON 1, when you escalate the most minimal problem to a trauma, you're constantly in trauma response. And so is exaggerated negative thinking, helpful? Of course it isn't. Is it harmful? That's the real question. It's very harmful because it gets you in a much elevated state that you don't need to be. And people can get this is my theory. I believe you can become very addicted to exaggerated negative thinking. It's neuroticism is sort of that in some way.
Yeah, I think it's very true. I laughed at it, but I actually like your reference to DEFCON 1, Defense Condition 1, because that's where you get when you're in that negative spiral that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. It literally feels like you're in a war.
Yeah.
And that Defense Condition 1 is exactly that. I'm in a war, and I'm now trying to figure out how to fend off the incoming attack.
Yes. Yes. I have a friend, she was going through some stuff and, we're not very close. She lives in another state. And so she texted me, she said, can we talk soon? I have some stuff I'd like to run by you. And I said, I would love to, but I'm pretty busy. I'll get back to you. But I don't think it's going to be for a few days. Well, with all that I have going on, I forgot. And so, which I feel bad about that. I apologize for forgetting what she meant. She said, so a couple weeks later, she said, I don't know what I did to offend you, but I didn't think you would ignore me. And I go, oh, I wasn't. I'm so sorry. I just did not follow. I mean, you sent me a text message. I had like 30 text messages after you, and I forgot. And I'm wrong, and I apologize. But she had created this entire negative, something that she said, I thought you were mad at me because of what happened, whenever. And I don't even know what you're talking about. I just, I simply forgot to send you a message, and I'm very sorry. But she laid it out like, oh my God, she had thought about that hard for a while and was very upset.
Yeah. And heck, I've done that. I think anybody listening to this has done that at one time or another.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, especially when it comes to like communication or I don't keep up with who likes or doesn't like my Facebook post or I don't do all that stuff. I just post and it's either, whatever happens. But I've had people say, you haven't liked my Facebook post for 3 weeks. I'm like, I haven't seen your Facebook post. I don't go seek it out. The idea that people have this negative spin because of a lack of whatever, they have turned it into so each person is living and dying a moment of, wow, I wonder what I did to upset when, you got to understand who I am. If I'm upset with you, I promise you, I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. Which is actually assuring or reassuring. It really is.
Yeah. I don't like the ambiguity of it all. I don't like to ghost people. I don't like to do any of that stuff. If we're upset, we're upset.
Mm-hmm.
If you are wondering that, ask me. And be prepared for my response because I like to be pretty blunt in my response. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to, poke a stick at the dog, don't be surprised if the dog bites.
Yes, exactly.
It's going to happen.
Yes, completely. So, but again, as you look down, the acronym here, that to me, the one, is this helpful? And of course, as soon as the question is asked, of course, it's not helpful. You can see, I also like to take it even further, just in thought in general. If you're having intrusive thoughts that sometimes aren't necessarily negative, but you can't let go of something, is this helpful is another question I use for that as well. Does that make sense? That is this helping? If this overthinking is helping on some level, let's continue that. But if it's not, let's move on from that.
Right. It's kind of a check, isn't it? Like,
Yes.
do I really want to go ahead with this negative thinking? Is that really what is going to serve me the most? That's what the H is saying.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
asking us the answer.
Yes.
How helpful is this really? And then the third one actually takes you to the next level because the next one is inspiring. I for inspiring. And I think we could all pretty much agree there's not a whole lot inspiring about negative thought patterns.
No, in fact, that was the one that sort of, to be honest with you, seemed a little silly. I just think, I think
maybe it's designed to make you laugh. Maybe that's the whole point of that.
Maybe it is. And maybe he just needed the word to make sense. So you throw that in there. But it's like, that one you can sort of go, okay, clearly nobody's thinking this is an inspiring train of thought. Productive might be another question. Is it productive at any level? But the P doesn't fit in there. So you need the I.
No, think doesn't quite spell out right. Yeah. So, yeah.
Maybe Russian. I don't know. It could be Russian.
Yeah, send your letters to Joel at.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But the next one actually does make some sense. The N of think stands for necessary.
Yes. That was one of the best.
Yeah.
Is it necessary? And as soon as you read the word, like, of course it's not necessary, but doesn't it feel necessary sometimes when you're in the middle of that?
Yeah. God, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, it's unavoidable. I mean, necessary. Yeah. Go far enough.
I have to do this. I have to, if I don't overthink it, it's like, I try to tell somebody the other day, like, you have today and you're going to get done what you're going to get done today. That's all you can cram into today. So worrying about 3 weeks from now is not a necessary concept. You're spending energy on the future that it's not going to be the same situation. So necessary in today, not just necessary, is this thought at this point in time necessary? You may have some concerns that are necessary. I need to address something, but nothing negative is going to be necessary at that moment. And it goes against that. But it feels necessary. That's overthinking sometimes feels productive when it's not.
I think there's also another advantage to having the word necessary in there, which is necessary. When you say the word necessary, is it necessary? There's an implied ending to that. The implied ending is it necessary? Necessary to what?
Yes. Yes.
Is it necessary to continue to be negative?
Yes.
Is it necessary to feel miserable? Is it necessary to feel trapped? Is it necessary to feel stuck?
Yeah.
When you complete the sentence, all of a sudden the whole question of necessary takes on a different meaning.
It does. It does. And the concept of any of this stuff of, it is necessary. If you want to feel trapped and stuck, negative thinking is a necessary concept to feel that way. If you look at it reverse, it fills that void. I mean, if you want to feel trapped, yes, negative thinking is necessary. But on the other side of it, it's, when you realize all of this is a voluntary concept going on in my brain, and it's involuntary on some level until you identify it, then it becomes voluntary.
Yeah, that's true, because most of the time we don't identify it, do we?
Right.
In most instances, when we're stuck in those negative thinking cycles, those trapped cycles, we're not thinking about what it is that we're doing. We just feel the result of it.
Yes. One of my really young clients has a lot of OCD thoughts, and we talked about ways he can control those intrusive thoughts, those negative thoughts, and he came up with I've offered him some of the concepts, but I always encourage everyone to say, look, here's some information of why. Here's one thing. Maybe this will help you develop your own thing. What works for you?
Right.
And so he said, like, when he called it as a movie, when he has one of these thoughts, it's like he plays the same movie over and over again. And and so he was watching a movie that had an old movie being made, and he heard the director yell, cut. So the moment he has one of those thoughts, he goes, cut, and just immediately forces a new thought not related.
Wow.
It's shockingly good. It works real well. I've shared that with other clients, and this is created by a 12-year-old. So,
well, that means it's bound to be good.
Yeah, it's usually the best stuff. But he has this hand motion where he goes, cut. And then he will not allow another word of that thought to come out and would shift over to something else. And it has drastically improved his quality of life.
I like that. That's
yeah.
Really, I'm going to remember cut.
Yeah.
I've tried stop. Stop doesn't really work, but cut. No. I like that.
Well, view it as a movie. That's what helps him. Like this movie's about to play again against your will. And
right.
The only way to stop that, the movement is cut and then have something positive to go to. Yeah. And immediately get there. And he said, Joel, that literally is almost cut out 95 to 97. I don't know how you get that number, but 95 to 97% of his negative thoughts. He said just that alone, because what happens, he felt obligated to continue the thought when it was arrived.
Right.
It's almost like there's some value to playing that thought all the way through, and it doesn't have any value.
So the moment that we've identified that a thought is counterproductive and not necessary is actually the exact same moment that we're reminded to say cut.
Cut, exactly. And with no debate, not like he said, if there's not a thought of should I cut stops it, and then the new thought is immediately put into play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like he plays, I don't know what sport he plays. He plays some sport, and he's very big into skateboarding, for example. So one of the things he'll do is, cut and then and immediately go, I got to get my skateboard fit. I want to get that new skateboard. I want to do it. And he gets into something that his brain does want to think about. And so it isn't like it's almost like, oh, that's better. That's more shiny. Let's go think about that as positive. And so he's really, I've always said, if you want something done well or come up with new ideas, ask a 12-year-old. And so I've shared that with a lot of my adult clients, and just using that word cut with his hand motion. There's something about that for him. Boom, cut, new thought. And it helps a lot.
Yeah, well, I can see why it would, because it combines a word, and words are powerful, with an action.
Yes.
It's a very short action. It's brief, but
yes.
It's a cutting motion, like a karate chop or something.
Yes.
Yeah, you combine two things like that together, you're going to get some power out of it.
Yes, completely. So it's a great idea.
Yeah. Now, I have to admit the last letter was my favorite. I'm rethinking now in terms of cut with necessary, but I think I'm going to stick with the last one being my favorite, because the last one is K for kind. And the reason that's my favorite is, for me, it's a reminder of just how much we beat the crap out of ourselves.
Yeah.
So the moment I get the kind is the moment I say to myself, oh, I'm doing it again, aren't I? Oh,
yeah. Yeah. It really for self-care, self-kindness, so to speak, being kind to yourself, that is one of the harder things to do in the midst of negative thinking, because we have such a negative dialogue on ourselves all the time when you're in that way of thinking. So being kind and gentle, even if you messed up, and negative thinking is based on you messing up, being kind to yourself. You're human. You made a mistake. Move on.
Right. Yeah. And that's the reminder of. So, okay. So think. Basically stop and ask, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Cut. And is it kind?
Yeah. Yeah. I love those. And, I'm going to vote that we vote off the island inspiring, just because it's silly, but we'll keep it there for fun if you want.
I like inspiring, just for that exact reason. You need to have humor when you're in the midst of a negative spiral like that.
I agree. Humor is the most, it applies a lot of, it is anti-negative for sure.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the best ways actually to break out of a negative spiral is to find something to laugh about it.
Oh,
if you
absolutely.
can do that, oh my God. I mean, it's not always easy to find, but if you can find it, whoo.
One of the things that helped me the most, was right after my son TJ died. I don't know, a few months after TJ died. It's a very long story, and I won't tell the whole story, but it was a really rough time. I was, for a month or two, I was just sort of zombie land. I was going through the motions, going to work. But me, I'm always kidding, always joking. There was no humor in my life for those 2 months. And, so there was an event that the kid next door, little kid, he just, he made me laugh so hard. It just, cause it was such an absurd thing, and he had no idea I saw that. So the nutshell story is the kid's 4 at the time. I didn't even know him at the time. We're very good friends now, but that's been many years ago. So he's out in the backyard, and I hear his sister scream. Let's say his name's John. Say, John's peeing in the yard again. And I happen to just look out the window, and here he is, his pants down around his ankles, and he's peeing in the yard, and he screams out, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not." And I don't know why that just made me laugh so much. It made me crack up.
Funny.
Yeah. And so one of the most, an unintentional act of humor is something that literally pulled, I'm not saying it solved anything, but it got me. Once I laughed, I remember, and I laughed hard, and I remember going, "I'm going to be okay." And it was some 4-year-old that had no idea he really helped me out.
Right.
And so humor is, I mean, I'm big on humor, as you know.
Yeah. I love that one too. I got to remember that.
Yeah. It's hilarious. Well, just to hear it live, because you're trying to, I didn't know these people at the time. They had just pretty much moved in, and I wasn't in the mood to really introduce myself, but I just had my back screen door open. It was sort of a spring day, and you're hearing, they're always screaming, they're always loud, and so you sort of ignore them. But just John's peeing in the yard again, and when you look out, his little shorts around his ankles, peeing straight up in the air. "No, I'm not. No, I'm not." And it was one of the funniest things. And so in fact, I was talking to his mom, reminded her about that this weekend, that it's just one of the things that I will, he's like almost 12 now. Okay. And he's really, really a great kid, and we're very close, but it was such a lifting moment. It was such humor saves me. It's humor. That's the time but it also gave me the ability to say, it's going to be okay. If I can laugh, it'll be okay.
Isn't it great too how life will bring us these seemingly unconnected moments? Because that seems completely unconnected to the death of your son.
Yes.
And yet you connected them, and they connected in a really helpful way.
Right. Well, I mean, if you take the synchronicity even further, I mean, our families have become so close, and you know what I mean? We're just very supportive of each other, and they've become very dear friends, basically because of that encounter, and then, because I always looked at him a lot differently after that. And, he knew I was a big chocolate fan, so he used to sneak me little Reese cups, and, so it's just, really cool kid. But it's this idea that we took something that not related, but it was so helpful to me. And he doesn't even know how I've never discussed it with him. When he's old enough, I'll explain that to him. But that was very valuable to me. And so, humor is, if you can find your laughter, it solves a lot. And I have humor as your number one, pulling people. If I can get somebody to laugh, that's good. I have that as number one, and number 1A is, if you really want to pull yourself out of a deep, dark, whatever, you write somebody a letter that you're grateful for and tell them why you're grateful for them. And that is a really good tool too. So humor in that is a good way to break out of negative depression, negative spiraling. But anything that takes action away from the thought is the point.
Yeah, that's the focus, isn't it? You're redirecting attention, even if it's only slightly. You have to redirect attention away from where you've been giving it, because otherwise you're just reinforcing the same thing over and over again. That's
absolutely. Yeah. And if you don't have an outlet to change that thinking, then you get into this negative circle. It becomes more that people don't realize they're sort of stuck in these negative patterns, and their life becomes negative, and it's just reinforced every day. And what a horrible way to live. And most people that live that way don't realize they can stop it.
Yeah. Well, even those of us who are conscious of it find it can be challenging. So if you're not conscious of it, it's going to feel completely overwhelming and impossible to surmount.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, having a tool like that is definitely helpful. And the gratitude one's an interesting one. I have to admit, I've tried doing that. I can't always get there because gratitude is such a higher vibration than depression or anger or something like that. So it's a long way to reach, but it can be done.
Well, and I go as far as, describing the exercise that I ask people to do. Think of someone who went out of their way unselfishly to help you along the way. And I want you to write, preferably handwritten, not my handwriting, I have to type, but people who can actually handwrite, write a letter if possible to someone, to this person, and explaining in detail how much they mean to you, how much they helped you, and how grateful for their presence their presence is in your life. And by the time you get to the end of that letter, with the full intention of either emailing it or I prefer to hand deliver it if possible, that you can't be depressed and be grateful for that person at that level.
Yeah, I would think that would be true. Think that would be true. The challenge, I think, is actually finishing the task. But if you can finish the task, I agree.
Yeah. Now, if you're down enough, it's hard to finish the task. It's hard to do it. But if you are able to do it, gratitude is the single most powerful position that we have. It is the most powerful mindset because it attracts more things to be grateful for. Making decisions when you're grateful in your life, you're going to make much better decisions. It's such an important thing to implement.
Yeah. Hey, you used a word earlier that was, talk about serendipity. It was serendipitous because it was also used in the episode that I recorded earlier today with Anne-Marie Young and our guest. And we kind of touched on it at the very end of the show. And I said, we need the whole show to do this one. Well, I don't have a whole show to do it here either, but I wanted to bring it up and get your take on it because you used the word productive.
Yes.
And that word productive, well, it can be used a lot of different ways. I mean, in the context of what we're talking about here, you can think of, well, how productive is it to be engaging in negative thinking? Or you could also flip it around and say, well, I am very effectively increasing my negative thinking by continuing to focus on it. So in that sense, there's a weird kind of productivity going on. But the context that I was bringing it up during the earlier episode was in the overall commercial economic realm that we use it. Because when you work for a company, they're always interested in productivity, and how productive the team is and how productive the projects are and individuals and all that kind of thing. Productivity is a really, really big thing, throughout the capitalistic world, really, probably in the communistic too, but even more so in capitalistic. And I wanted to kind of explore the possibility that maybe we as a society are giving too much power to the idea of being productive. The reason I mention that is when we focus so heavily on productivity, the overwhelming tendency is to focus a lot less on creativity. Because productivity is about doing labor as effectively and efficiently as possible, which is not necessarily conducive to creative. Creative behavior is hard to predict when it's going to happen. It comes when it's ready to come. It comes when you're most relaxed, when you're least focused, when you're least tied up on, I got to solve a problem and so forth. And it just leads me to wonder. I mean, well, not wonder. I actually believe this. I think we focus too much on productivity as a concept and to our own detriment, not just to the detriment of corporations, but also of individuals. I think it actually works both ways. Now, that's going to fly in the face of what a lot of people believe, including most people who invest in the stock market, because they want to have high levels of productivity. That's how they believe they're going to achieve the highest levels of profitability. I totally get that. I understand where they're coming from. But the question I want to put to you and to the listening audience is it really true? Is it really true that it is most profitable to be productive as possible? On the surface, that seems to be the case. On the surface, that seems to be what everybody points to. And yet, I've learned enough in the 11 plus years that I've been doing this show with you and others to realize just how powerful creativity is, just how powerful the human mind is in its ability to focus, just how powerful the active focusing is, which really doesn't have a whole lot to do with being productive, and yet it is incredibly productive. So that's my thesis is the focus on productivity is non-productive or counterproductive.
Well, I think with everything, we say this in every show at some point, I think everything is going to be based on your perspective of who you are, what you are, and what you're considering. So if you're a Wall Street guy, they're going to go with Walt, you're crazy.
Absolutely. They're going to turn you off.
They're going to just observe you hippie. They're going to just shut you down. They're not going to. So perspective based is going to be the lens you're viewing that statement through. But when you take it to the deeper level, the balance, the power of the balance of being creative with productivity. I think the quality of life is more the question in my mind, not just profitability, but a creative life where you're able to, enjoy, create, think, have that's, and not so much an emphasis on raw productivity, because you get stuck in that. You get, it leads you to the sort of that over wanting, that wanting it too much, which has a reverse effect on the law of attraction.
Yes.
So, when you, like, I know companies that are so, Amazon, for example, their warehouse, not their drivers and all that, but their warehouse, they are super demanding. I mean, you're going. You get a couple minutes in the bathroom. They are very, very, tense is the word. They're very, they're demanding what they perceive as productivity.
I would go with anal, but I'll go with tense. Tense is okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. But also knowing some people that have worked there over the years, the idea that doesn't necessarily make things more productive. It gives the illusion of more productivity, but people aren't enthusiastically operating. They'll always find loopholes. They'll always slow it down. So they're almost fighting the system. Where if you encourage people to, have some creativity, have some more, let's look at the bigger picture. Happiness is part of the equation. Employee happiness. And Amazon's turnover rate is outrageous in their warehouse. And they'll hire about anybody. It's a good job for somebody, but there's not a lot of, processing going on there. They just hire you and they're assuming you may last, 3.2 months or whatever their statistic is, and we'll just keep hiring people. That's what they do. And it's not the most productive way, but they think it is.
But that's just the point. It's not actually productive. It seems on the surface, it appears to be productive.
Yes.
But it really isn't, especially if you take into account the cost of new employee acquisition. And that's another metric. I won't even go there, but that certainly has to measure in.
No. Yeah. Look, it costs a lot to train an employee. There's a lot. Also, in full disclosure, I am an Amazon stockholder, so I'm not being negative. Go Amazon, keep doing good. I'm just using that as an example because that's the obvious one here. But I look at companies that focus more on, creativity. Our ultimate job is to be productive. Like Google's campus is really focused on creativity, in a lot of ways, but their productivity, they're one of the biggest companies in the world. And so they're very productive coming from the creativity. And so there's models of how you can combine that, but you as a person determines what productivity means to you. And if you're just raw productivity, I think you're missing the whole point, is I think what you're saying.
Well, I would go a little bit further than that. I would say that what you're calling raw productivity is actually a form of negative thinking.
Yes.
And the reason I say it's negative thinking is that it's based on fear. It's based on the fear that if you don't turn the entire employment team into a well-oiled machine, you're going to lose money compared to what you could make. The problem is it's false. It's false because it's based on the idea of fear. And anytime you put fear into the equation, you're going to lose. It seems like you can win. It always does. That's why people are so drawn to fear-driven stuff. That's why so much marketing is fear-driven. They think, oh, if I can just inspire the right level of fear or anger or angst or whatever in the consumer, they're going to buy this product that we're trying to sell.
Yes.
And the thing that makes it particularly confusing, I guess perhaps is the best word, is that there is some truth to it. You can inspire consumers to buy using negative emotion. The flaw in the thinking, though, is that it's fear-based, and because it's fear-based, it's actually less productive, less able to sell than if you could flip it around, if you could find a higher vibrational place to sell from.
Right.
And that's the hard message. That's the message that the Wall Street people don't want to hear because they don't have any metrics on it. There are no analytics on that.
There's not. And one of the things that happened, in the recent presidential elections is when there is no positivity left, and nobody's telling you what they're going to do for you in these elections anymore.
No.
They're telling you how bad and evil the opponent is,
right,
and how their job is to they're planning on raping your children, taking your guns, right, and and basically making us China. That's what they're selling you on.
Or if it's the left wing, it's they're going to destroy the planet. They're going to ruin the ecosystem.
Yes.
They're going to basically undermine all the human labor and all the usual issues, right? Yeah. And so, no matter which side,
that has become politics nowadays. There's no. Hey, my opponent is a pretty good guy. We just sort of disagree on these areas. Here's my strengths.
Yeah, that's gone.
That's gone. There is none of that. You're not telling me why that guy's evil, but if you don't vote for me, this guy is going to take everything that matters from you away.
Right.
And that's what they go. That's how they do it. And so that's politics now. And there's so much evidence. So Wall Street looks at that and said, my goodness, that Fox News and, CNN, the highest ratings ever are during these crazy argument times during elections, and they're making the most money ever. I've used the example before, and to make a point, on any given day when there's nothing going on, the Weather Channel's rating is like nothing. They have a really low viewership.
I love this. Yeah.
Yeah. But you put a hurricane in the Gulf and boom, they're way up there where that dude that shows up at Hurricane, what's his name? Don't know his name. But he's always on the news. He'll show up and stand out there in the wind. And so Weather Channel's really popular during hurricanes. So it worked so well for them. They started naming winter storms to give them more threat. Like instead of saying we have a nor'easter, we have the Steve nor'easter. Steve is, and so now by naming these winter storms, it elevates them. And it's been proven their ratings go up since they started doing that.
It's really quite illuminating, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's making it very, very clear how they're getting our attention.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're the ones giving the attention. Let's not beat around the bush here. We are the ones giving the attention. The human population, it wouldn't work if we didn't do it.
Yes. Yeah. One of there's several of these videos, but the one that I always love the most is there's this on Weather Channel during one of the hurricanes in Florida. There's this lady and she's holding onto her hat. She's fighting the wind. She's leaning into the wind. It's 100-mile-an-hour winds and all. And in the scene, these two dudes are just walking casual. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And she even started laughing. I mean, it was this very dramatic live shot. And, she was just, what are we going to do with this? And these two guys are just walking along, talking. But again, the drama, the exaggeration, that's what sells it. Negativity, fear, those things are where the money is. Those things are what and at the end of the day, we've become so bottom line money driven. The idea that works. So productivity to those people are creating fear. To be productive, we create fear, we make more money. And there's evidence to prove that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what is ultimately going to happen here, now this is pure speculation, this is blue sky. I can't give you any evidence to support this. This is just my take on things. But I think what ultimately is going to shift this is that it's going to be part of a larger trend that has been going on for quite some time. You mentioned politics, for instance. I think one of the things that's happening in the world of politics is that our political institutions are losing credibility.
Yes.
I don't care who you're talking to, left, right, center. I mean, people are just losing faith in political institutions. Same thing with the news. I mean, people are losing faith in the news. The various institutions that we've taken for granted in our society and in our societies around the world over the last, 50, 100 years, something like that, are crumbling.
Yeah.
It's a long, slow, almost erosion-like crumbling that's going on. And I think ultimately that is the process that in the long run leads us to finally recognize how we were undermining ourselves with our emphasis on productivity. Because in this case, the productivity that we're talking about is, well, how productive it is if you ratchet up everybody's negative emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see that. And so when your metric is of productivity, and that's the key word. What metric are you really using for productivity? That's what you got to look at. If it's bottom line dollar, that, if everything is simply that, then it's one measure. That's why, Wall Street guys have one point in life. That is to make money. There's not a lot of morals attached to that. Let's go make money. I lost a widow's last $500,000. Oops, sorry. Made a mistake, whatever, move on. There's not a lot of, or I made her another 500,000, either one, but they don't care which one. It's just about production. How much can I buy or sell or get profit on? And that's what drives them. And the end of the day, their paycheck determines productivity, period. That's all they look at.
That's right. And that's why I'm thinking that as institutions erode and decay and crumble, then that mechanism starts to fall apart. Yes. What happens whenever an institution of some kind, like the 2008 financial crisis, it was the banking institution that's crumbling, right?
Yes.
Well, what happened? Well, the economy went into this huge tailspin.
Yes.
Wall Street said, no, the sky is falling, help me. And because the sky seemed to be falling, they all kind of fell away from what they've been doing for years, which was the usual pattern for investment. They said, oh, this is terrible, this is horrible. I guess the question I want to bring up, or perhaps the observation I want to make, is how terrible was it really? And I say that as somebody who lost everything in the financial crisis of 2008, because my entire business got wiped out by it. I've mentioned that many times in the show. I wasn't in real estate or mortgages, but my business was collateral damage, but nevertheless, I got wiped out by it. And yet, as I look back on it, well, first of all, I never want to go through that again. We've mentioned that kind of thing before. I did learn things from it. That's a good thing. But I also recognize that collapse wasn't the catastrophe that I thought it was. There was actual value in the collapse.
Yeah.
And if I were to point at my own business, the business that I lost, you know what the biggest advantage to that loss was? It took me years to figure this out. I mean, it took me, 4 years later, I'm doing this podcast to try to figure out, why I'm struggling so much. That's why I started. You became my 12th interview, back in 2012. And I was really just kind of lost. But as I look back on it now, what I recognize is I needed to go through all of that crash so that I could understand that the industry I was in was the wrong industry for me.
Yeah.
And I had the wrong attitude about it. And I had an attitude that was going to reinforce and compound loss. I had a belief system that was going to just keep reinforcing it over and over and over again. I needed it to collapse so that I couldn't keep hanging on to it anymore. If it didn't collapse, I would have been in really, really bad shape. The collapse was the best thing that could have happened from that perspective. It was the way that I could let go of it.
Yeah.
And I see the same thing happening with our other institutions. As they collapse, it seems on the surface like it's a catastrophe, but in the long run, it's basically helping us to let go of something we didn't want to let go of.
Well, and on any of these events, there's always another side to it. There's always a rebound or a profit. So when everything sort of fell apart, I had some friends that, had a lot of cash. And at the time, back in the day when everything fell apart in 2008, anybody, your dog could get a mortgage. I mean, anybody could get seriously, there were dogs that had named, just as a joke. Yeah. Anybody, any being can get a mortgage instantly and for whatever number, it doesn't matter. And nobody cared. They were just flipping properties, making a ton of money. So everything stopped. Everything collapsed. The companies were back. They came in with drastic regulations. It was almost impossible to get a home loan after that. It was, I mean, you had to have the most perfect credit, everything. Banks did not, so it went way down. Right. Well, I know multiple people. One guy I'm thinking about in particular, he had quite a bit of cash that you just, a few $100,000. And there was this local credit union down in Florida that had like an entire subdivision was under development and all that stopped. But there were 4 houses that were there. They were built, ready to go, and they were just there. So he just saw these empty houses and realized they had the cash. Now these are, at the time, before the crash, they were about $300,000 houses each one, right? About $300,000 a piece. Right. So he goes to the bank or the credit union and he said, how much do you want for those houses? And, they said, we don't know. We're trying to figure out all this stuff. He said, I'll give you $200,000 for all of them. Cash. No problem. And they said, we're likely not going to take that.
It's just to lose 5/6 of the value, of the perceived value. Yeah.
Yeah. He said, here's my number. If you ever want it, I have cash. We can close tomorrow. So as the bank is looking at as the credit union is looking at all these huge losses and nobody was qualifying for loans, they called him and said, give us $300,000 for all of them and we'll take it. He did. He had some little money he had to put into it. Back then people couldn't buy houses, so he started renting all 4 of those houses. Okay. Made sense. People still had to live. They were renting. People had lost their home before, still have to rent, so he was able to do that. Then since they weren't going to be able to buy a mortgage, he offered to finance it for them after a few years and do that. And
so rent to buy
basically. And he's getting, top dollar for the mortgage. He's getting all this. Some of them were, 2 of the houses, the people were rent to buy. They weren't able to do it. So all the money they paid, they lost. So he was able to rent and sell them again. Mm-hmm. So his $300,000 investment and probably $100,000 repair, $400,000 is what he has in the property, basically. He sold all of them for a total, when you add it up, for $1.6 million profit off of all the stuff. So opportunity existed after the collapse. There's always opportunity after. When the pandemic started and everything was collapsing and nobody knew what was going to happen, I made a statement to my client. I don't know how, but we're going to come out better because of this. I can't tell you why, but we're going to come out better. And I have several young clients that started their own business, entrepreneurial stuff. Working from home became a thing. There's these side hustles that became a thing. They went out and figured out how to do it. I had my best years since the pandemic began. I had the highest demand for me of all time. Wow, that pandemic was a big boost in my life and to my client's life. And it was sky was falling back then. Remember, it was all falling apart. And so that narrative of, like you're saying, when life is going to have these moments and your perception of them being negative or the world's falling apart is, again, understanding how this all works, staying with it, not giving up, keeping that mindset right. The comebacks are always there. The next step is you lost your business in 2008. And eventually that was simply a redirection, as you're saying. It's a redirection. And accepting the redirections without wallowing in the pity of it all, that self-pity of all that is sort of to me, the secret of life.
I wish I had done that, to be honest. If I could say that, I'd be really happy, but I can't say that. It took years to get past it.
Yeah. Well, no, but also you didn't have any other way of really understanding how to deal with that, exactly. But like right now, the mindset for me is I have multiple things going on. I have my friend and I are looking at starting some business stuff together because she's super organized and I'm pathetically unorganized. And you know, I still have this mindset. Look, we can try it. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, I like to throw a bunch of stuff up. Some of it's going to work, some of it's not. We're not going to get stuck on it. Let's just go. Let's do stuff. And it's going to be fun. And, you know, she has a skill set I don't have, and I have some skills that, you know, I'm sure she has, but I'm probably, you know, I'm the big picture guy. She's the detail person. You know, that's a good thing. That's good to have that teamwork. Yeah.
I've been discovering that in my own life. I haven't really talked about it much here on the show, but I think I've told you I've got a project I've been working on for the last 2.5 years.
Yes.
Trying to basically create a way to have an income for people who are Facebook group administrators, because they really get abused by Facebook and they put a lot of work in. They get no compensation for it. And, you know, they're dealing, basically they're trying to deal with the fact that Facebook's, algorithm is a really, really bad algorithm for keeping bad actors out. So they have to do all the hard work themselves. They have to do all the heavy lifting, and they aren't being rewarded for it. And I was asking myself then, how do you reward them? There ought to be some way to be able to pay them. Why can't Facebook pay them? And what I ended up coming to the conclusion was, well, all we have to do is just find a way to sell advertising in the group and then, you know, share the revenue with them. There's instant income. Well, that sounds like a really, really easy concept. It's a lot harder to actually implement. I've been spending the last 2.5 years finding every single way possible to not make it happen. I have hired.
You've eliminated.
Yeah, I'm good at it. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Good job.
I've hired 4 different development teams. All 4 of them have completely failed. The 4th one failed less than the others, so that was an improvement.
Yeah.
But it was still a failure. And it finally dawned on me after the 4th failure what one of the major reasons for the failure was. It goes back to my own experience, because years ago I was a graphic designer. By accident, I found out I was a graphic designer by somebody who hired me because he saw it in me and I didn't see it in myself. I'd been hired for something else completely different. But I learned how to be a designer, and I learned how to be a low-level developer. That was the web business that got wiped out in 2008. I knew how to do both sides of it. And so I assumed, well, everybody else who gets in the field knows how to do that too. It was completely wrong. It was a completely wrong assumption, because as it turns out, the 2 functions use entirely different sections of the brain. The programmer side, the developer side, is completely left brain. It's all linear thinking, all logical thinking.
Yes.
The right side, the designer side, is all about the big picture thinking, like you were just talking about.
Yes.
They're 2 entirely different thought processes. You know what the amazing thing was? The amazing thing is I could do both at one time. That was the amazing thing, but I made the mistake of assuming that everybody else could do that. Once I finally recognized what my mistake was, literally today, I hired a designer only to do the design part and not do the development part. And once I've got a design, then I'm going to go hire a developer and say, okay, here's a design that you can physically see. You can see exactly how everything lays out, how it all connects together. You just got to connect it. Use the programming to connect. And I know I'm going to get the final product I've been looking for.
That's brilliant.
2.5 years to figure that out.
Well, yeah. But you're right. You got there, though.
I got there.
That's the key. Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is in the context of stopping negative thoughts and in the context of this productivity discussion we've been talking about. The way I was doing it before was based on what I understood about what was productive.
Yes.
And it turned out my assumptions about productivity were wrong. I was completely, totally messed up by this idea, well, you got to be productive. You got to have a productive team that knows how to do this with the design, that with the development. No, that's not the way productivity works. I forgot the creative piece of it. I forgot that you can't put analytics on creativity and expect to actually have good creativity come out of it. I forgot that.
Yes.
And once I introduced that, then I said to myself, oh, I just need to think about this differently. I need to approach this differently. I need to stop thinking in terms of what's productive and start thinking in terms of what works.
Yeah. You nailed it.
Yeah.
And I like how, when you get stuck on one way of thinking, you get stuck on one concept. Mm-hmm. It takes a while to break it because you're stuck in a thinking pattern.
Took me 2.5 years.
Yeah. When you realize, I've shared this story before, but it's one of my favorite stories. I have a little cousin. He's a grown man now, but back in the day, I I was having probably one of the more difficult times of my life. I was living in Tampa. Things were really rough for me. I basically was unemployed. No, not basically. I was unemployed. Middle of the middle of a gambling addiction, and things weren't going well. So I was in a deep depression. My house was disgusting. I lived in an apartment. It was just, it was dirty, and I didn't have the wherewithal to fix it up. So I would have these moments of, let me get going. I know I got to clean my house. That felt so normal.
Right.
So I have this little cousin who always enjoyed hanging out with me. And I thought, I'll bring him over and he'll help me clean, and then we'll just go see a cheap movie or something. And he'll do most of the work, and I'll be happy and he'll be happy. You know what I mean? So I had this plan for child labor, basically. And so one of the things that I was, as disgusting as it sounds, my shower curtain was disgusting. Mildew. It was not good. And the shower curtain line was just disgusting. So, we went to the grocery store. And again, I had probably $30 to my name at the time. And I needed to pay for us to go see a movie. So I was really tight money. And so there were X14 is a mildew remover. I don't know if you've ever heard of X14.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the store brand was $4 cheaper than X14. Okay. X14 was like $9. The store brand was like, $5, right?
Right.
So
right.
I'm reading the ingredients because do I pay the extra money for the X14? What do I do with this? And so I'm really in depth, so that my cousin comes up to me and he goes, Joel. And I'm going, don't interrupt me. I'm busy with this. And I'm going back and forth, and I turn around and he hands me a new shower curtain liner for $2.
I love it. It.
Yeah. I was stuck on one way of thinking. I was stuck on, we're going to go spend hours in this toxic smelling stuff, cleaning it, versus all I did was take it down, crumbled it up, and it cost $2 for the shower curtain line. That was it. And it was such an epiphany to me at that moment. Like I didn't even look at that idea, that I was just solely focused on that one train of thought. That's what you're talking about. For 2.5 years, you knew what you wanted, but you were stuck on, this is how I want to do it, versus
this is how it has to be. Yeah.
Yes.
Ugh. It's truly remarkable how powerful our brains are. It's also truly remarkable how we misuse them.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have my friend that I told you we're going to start doing some business stuff together. I made this statement. I said, I need your help because I'm highly inefficient. I don't get, I have so much stuff going on. I'm inefficient. She pointed out to me, she goes, Joel, you make a really good living. You take care of your son. You manage a lot. So it isn't that I'm not inefficient. It's, the stuff that I take for granted, most people go, wow, you're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
But writing my book, doing my public speaking, doing these things I want to do, I am super inefficient because of my ADHD, but my perspective is I am inefficient, and that's not accurate. I'm not inefficient because the stuff that is the basic stuff by anybody's, and this sounds arrogant when I say it out loud, but I don't mean it to be, but by anybody's standard, I'm successful. I take care of my kid. I check the box. I got good, what I mean? I got all that stuff going on. I manage the basic stuff. So most people say, you're very efficient with that. And I am. I've learned to be with that. But taking it further, the other areas of my life, that's where my efficiency needs to be improved.
Yeah, I think we all have one of those areas too. We have probably a number of them, each one of us.
Yeah.
And that's probably a good place to stop because it reminds us, okay, time to take stock. What areas do I need to eliminate like that? Where do I need to change my thinking, my THINK?
Yes, and one of the last things too, Walt, starting the new year, one thing we're very consistent about is, once again, we've run over.
Yes.
We're consistent still in 2024.
It's good to know that we're consistent in that way,
Yes, absolutely.
To me, it's one of the best indicators that I have that we have a lot of fun.
We do. It's very fun. I always enjoy this, my friend.
I enjoyed it as well. And I look forward, by the way, you and I are going to have a guest in 2 weeks. We're going to have somebody.
Oh, who's it? Do I know this person?
I just did her podcast today. Her name is Nikki LaCroce, and she's a millennial and really, really interesting young woman. Very, very cool perspective on things. I think the two of you are going to hit it off. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Excellent.
So looking forward to that. Anyway, I will see you next week. Looking forward to that. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.